You're embarrassing yourself, Johnson. Don't make a scene, my wife whispered through clenched teeth, her hand still resting on her boss's arm, the same man she once swore she couldn't stand. The room froze. She didn't know that the moment she looked at me like a stranger, she set fire to everything we'd built. What happened after that party will make you question how quiet a man's revenge can be when he stops begging to be seen. Viewers, what would you do if the person you loved pretended you didn't exist, right in front of their lover? Let's talk about it in the comments. Subscribe, like, comment, and watch till the ending to share this interesting story to family and friends. My name is Johnson Wayne. I'm 36 years old and an architect in London. I design glass towers and luxury flats, places that stand tall, clean, and unshakable. People call them masterpieces of precision. I like that word, precision. It means control. It means balance. And I used to think I had both. My marriage to Lena was the one thing I thought didn't need drafting or revision. It felt organic, natural, like a space that simply worked. I met her 5 years ago at a small gallery in Shoreditch. She was studying marketing, scribbling ideas into a notebook between sips of cheap wine. She said I looked like someone who saw the world in straight lines. I told her she looked like someone who lived between them. We laughed about it and that was it. Back then she was all passion and promise. I paid her rent a few months later when she couldn't make it. Helped her finish her degree by designing a portfolio site for her projects. When she got her first real job, she cried in my arms and said, "You make me feel safe." That word, safe, still echoes in my head like an architectural flaw I missed on a blueprint. Because now, safety is the last thing I feel. It started small as all cracks do. Her phone face down more often. Her schedule suddenly unpredictable. The woman who once hated corporate parties now dressed like she lived for them. When I'd ask how her day went, she'd shrug and scroll through her messages. Sometimes she'd look at me like I was part of the furniture, dependable, sturdy, invisible. A few nights ago, I woke up thirsty. I walked into the living room and her phone was buzzing on the couch. Normally I'd never look. But that night I did. The message on the screen read, "See you Friday night, my love. Can't wait to show you off, red heart." I froze. Not because I didn't expect it, deep down I did, but because of the word show. She wasn't being taken somewhere. She was being displayed. I slipped the phone back quietly and stood there for a while, staring at her sleeping form on the couch. She looked peaceful. Too peaceful for someone living a lie. The next morning she was cheerful, unnaturally so. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "Babe, my friend's having a party this weekend. You should come with me. You'll love it." Her tone was light, but I heard the tension underneath, the same tone clients use when they're about to hide a structural fault behind fancy design. I nodded and smiled. Sure. Why not? Inside I was already drawing lines, invisible ones, between trust and betrayal, between love and performance. That Friday would be the night I'd see everything clearly, even the parts she thought were hidden. Friday arrived like a slow, tightening knot in my chest. The day was gray, the kind of London gray that makes everything feel heavier. I spent most of the afternoon at the office, pretending to focus on structural plans for a residential project in Battersea, but my mind kept circling back to Lena. Her message. That heart emoji. The word love. By the time I got home, the flat smelled of something unfamiliar. Effort. She'd cooked. Candlelight, wine glasses, jazz humming from her playlist. A scene straight out of the early days, but the timing was wrong. Everything felt rehearsed. She looked stunning. Black dress, hair swept up, the kind of perfume she used to wear when we were new. "I wanted to make tonight special," she said, sliding a plate toward me. "You've been working too hard lately." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But her eyes didn't match her tone. They darted too quickly, glancing at her phone every few minutes, lighting up with each vibration. "You seem distracted," I said softly. She smiled, that same practiced, dismissive smile I'd seen too many times. "Just thinking about tomorrow night," she said. "You're still coming, right? To Martin's party?" There it was. Martin. The name I'd only heard once before, some colleague from her firm. She described him as charming in a harmless way, which in my experience is how people describe the danger they secretly crave. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I'll be there. I wouldn't miss it." Her relief was too quick, too obvious. "Good," she said almost to herself. "It'll be good for us." As she spoke, her phone buzzed again. She reached for it, hesitated, then turned it face down. But not before I saw a fragment of the message flash across the screen. "Can't wait to finally meet him." Me. I took a sip of wine and smiled. "You've been busy lately," I said casually. Late nights, new friends? I hardly see you anymore. She chuckled lightly. That's work life, babe. You wouldn't understand, different world. There was something in the way she said it, a subtle superiority, like she'd evolved and left me in an older version of her life. Later that night, as we lay in bed, I listened to the rhythm of her breathing. She fell asleep easily, I didn't. My mind wandered through flashbacks. The first time she'd stayed out for drinks with coworkers, the weekend she claimed to be visiting her cousin but left no address, the perfume I didn't recognize on her coat. I had ignored every red flag because I didn't want to seem paranoid. But denial doesn't stop betrayal, it just delays the confirmation. Around midnight I got up for water. The living room glowed faintly from her phone screen on the counter. One new voice note from Martin. Curiosity 1. I pressed play. His voice was low, confident. Don't worry, love. He'll never know. Tomorrow's about us. I didn't breathe for a full minute. When I looked back at the couch, her phone buzzed again, this time a text. Make sure he comes. It'll make everything easier. I stared at those words until the light dimmed out. She wanted me there. At his party. At her lover's party. I turned off the screen, walked to the window, and watched the rain trace lines down the glass. Lines that looked like cracks spreading through everything I'd built. Tomorrow I decided I'd go. Not to confront her. Not to argue. I'd go to see what kind of woman my wife had. Subscribe as you continue enjoying the story. Saturday night dripped with an unease I couldn't shake. London was glowing, the streets slick from a fresh drizzle, headlights shimmering across puddles like restless eyes. Lena was radiant, dressed in a shimmering silver gown that hugged her in all the places I used to trace with my fingers. Her perfume was stronger tonight, seductive, deliberate. It filled the car as we drove, pressing against my chest like an invisible hand. She hummed softly along to a song on the radio, completely at ease. I wasn't. My knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. I had rehearsed the drive a dozen times in my head, but now that it was real, every detail felt magnified. Her laughter, the faint reflection of her smile in the window, the way she avoided my gaze when I looked over. You okay? She asked suddenly. You're quiet. I'm fine, I lied. Just curious what kind of party this is. She hesitated just for a breath. It's corporate. Casual. You'll love it. I smiled, small and sharp. Can't wait to meet Martin. She froze for half a second before recovering, letting out a breathy laugh. You mean my boss? Oh, don't make it sound weird. He's harmless. Harmless. I'd heard that word before. When we arrived, the house was grand, one of those Georgian-style townhouses tucked into Kensington, with tall glass doors and soft golden light spilling through the windows. Valets moved briskly, laughter and clinking glasses drifted from inside. The kind of place where secrets didn't echo, they whispered. As we stepped in, everything slowed. Music thumped faintly in the background, smooth jazz overlaid with low chatter. Faces I didn't recognize turned toward us, polished, perfumed, practiced. Lena greeted everyone with an ease that made me feel like a stranger next to her. She belonged here. Or at least she wanted to. Johnson, this is Martin, she said finally, guiding me through a cluster of people. He was taller than I expected, in his mid-40s, the kind of man who looked expensive without trying, tailored suit, watch that screamed subtle power. When he smiled, it didn't reach his eyes. He extended his hand. So this is the husband I've heard so much about. Only the good things, I hope, I said evenly, shaking his hand. Of course, he replied with a glint of amusement. Lena speaks very fondly of you. The room buzzed around us, but my ears tunneled in on his voice. Fondly. The word was an insult disguised as flattery. Lena's cheeks colored slightly. She glanced away, pretending to spot someone across the room. I'll go say hi to the team, she murmured, already drifting off before I could respond. And then she was gone, swallowed by the crowd, her laughter weaving through the air like smoke I couldn't grasp. For the first 15 minutes I played the role, polite smiles, firm handshakes, nodding through meaningless small talk. But every time I glanced across the room I saw her, leaning in too close to Martin, whispering, touching his arm lightly in that way that once belonged to me. I made my way toward the bar. The bartender, a quiet man with tired eyes, gave me a sympathetic nod. Rough night? He asked. I chuckled under my breath. Not yet. Give it time. Half an hour later, I stood near the balcony, alone. Lena hadn't spoken to me once since the introductions. When I tried to approach her, she smiled tightly, said, "We'll talk later, darling," and turned away. Darling. That word used to mean something. Tonight it sounded like camouflage. Then it happened. A photographer called for a group picture. "Martin, Lena, come here," he said. They stood together, his hand lingering a little too long on her waist. She didn't pull away. The flash went off, bright and unforgiving. When the light faded, she turned to him, laughing, not just laughing, glowing. And in that moment she looked free. Like I'd never existed. I could feel the burn of humiliation spread across my face. People looked, whispered. Someone asked quietly, "Is that her husband?" Another chuckled. I set my drink down and turned toward the exit before I said or did something I'd regret. "Johnson, leaving so soon?" Martin called after me, still smirking. I didn't look back. I just said, "Enjoy the party," and walked out. The night air hit me hard, cold, cutting, real. The music inside dulled to a heartbeat behind the walls. For a moment I stood on the curb, staring at the reflection of the golden lights in the puddles. Then I started walking, nowhere in particular, just away. From her. From them. From the man I'd been trying too hard to be. That night I didn't look back once. But part of me knew, this wasn't the end. Not yet. The morning after the party was eerily still. The flat felt colder, emptier, as if someone had left the windows open to let the warmth escape. I didn't sleep that night. I just walked. Through the rain, past shuttered cafes and quiet streets, until the city itself seemed to whisper you knew all along. By the time I got home, dawn was just starting to bruise the horizon. Lena's car wasn't in the driveway. She hadn't come back. That, more than anything, told me everything I needed to know. I took off my soaked jacket, tossed it over the chair, and sat in silence. The smell of her perfume still lingered faintly in the room, sweet, expensive, deceitful. Her glass from the night before was still half full of wine. I stared at it for a long time, thinking how love ages like that, untouched, souring quietly while you pretend it's still fine to drink. Around 8 a.m., the sound of keys jingling broke the silence. She stepped in, sunglasses on, wearing the same dress from the party. Her lipstick was smudged, hair slightly undone. She froze when she saw me sitting there. "Morning," I said softly. Her voice faltered. "You're up early." "I never slept." She hesitated, then walked past me toward the kitchen. "You shouldn't have left like that last night. People asked where you went." I almost laughed. People asked? The hypocrisy of her concern was almost comical. "I figured you didn't need me there," I said calmly. "You seemed occupied." She turned sharply, defensiveness flashing in her eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, leaning back in my chair, "that for a moment, I watched my wife act like I was invisible. Like I was an inconvenience she brought to impress her lover." Her jaw tightened. "You're being ridiculous, Johnson." "Am I?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I hadn't taken pictures, but I didn't need to. "He called you love in a voice note." "I heard it." "You forgot to lock your phone last night." Her expression changed, from anger to shock, then to something colder. The truth sat heavy between us, undeniable and ugly. She didn't deny it. She just sighed. "It's complicated." That phrase, the coward's anthem. "Complicated," I repeated, nodding slowly. "Tell me, was it complicated when you planned that party? When you told him you couldn't wait for me to meet him?" Her voice softened. "Johnson, I didn't want it to happen this way. But it happened," I said. She sat down across from me, rubbing her temples. "You don't understand. Martin, he's not just my boss. He helped me when I thought you were losing interest. You've been so distant, buried in work." I felt alone. I stared at her, this woman I'd once built a life around, and realized she'd rewritten our entire story in her head. Her guilt had found a justification. My loyalty had been turned into neglect. "You felt alone," I said quietly. "So your solution was betrayal?" She opened her mouth, closed it again. For the first time she looked small, not guilty but cornered. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "You didn't hurt me," I said, standing. "You ended us. There's a difference." I walked to the bedroom, pulled out a suitcase and began packing. She followed me, her voice trembling. "Johnson, please. Don't make a scene." I smiled faintly. "A scene?" "Lena, the scene already happened, at the party. This is just the credits." Flashbacks flickered in my mind as I folded shirts, our first flat in Brixton, her laughter echoing off the bare walls. The promise we made under a flickering streetlight the night we got engaged. The nights I stayed late at work so she could chase her career dreams. All those sacrifices had led here, to betrayal in a silver dress. When I zipped the suitcase, she reached for my arm. "Please, can't we talk about this later?" I turned to her. "Later doesn't exist anymore." I left her standing there, speechless, mascara already smudging at the corners of her eyes. For a moment I felt pity. Then I remembered Martin's smirk, her laughter, the way she looked through me like I was a stranger. That pity vanished. Outside the rain had stopped. The air felt cleaner, sharper. I loaded my suitcase into the car, but before I drove off I looked back at the window. She was there watching, small and distant behind the glass. That's when I decided something. I wasn't going to destroy her. I was going to let her destroy herself, slowly, completely, and publicly. And I'd be there to watch every second of it. When I left the house that morning, I didn't head to work. I just drove, aimlessly at first, through the winding streets of South London, letting the city's chaos drown out my thoughts. The rain had cleared, but the clouds still hung low, heavy like the weight in my chest. I didn't feel rage yet. Just numbness. The kind that comes before something colder, sharper, more deliberate. By midday, I parked outside the riverfront cafe where Lena and I used to go on Sundays. I ordered coffee, sat by the window, and stared at the water until the world blurred. That's when the thoughts began to organize themselves, like blueprints in my mind. I'm an architect. My work is structure, precision, and patience. And revenge, I realized, isn't that different. You don't rush it. You design it, carefully, beautifully, so that when it collapses, it does so on its own. That was when I made my first call. Wayne, the voice on the other end said, Tom, my oldest friend, a lawyer who had seen me through university in Heartbreak. You sound like hell. I need to know something, I said. If a company executive is having an affair with a subordinate, and it's affecting their workplace, would that be grounds for investigation? There was a pause. Potentially, yes. Depends on company policy and evidence. Why? Just curiosity. Johnson, he said carefully, what did she do? I didn't answer. Some truths are better saved for when they can be shown. Later that afternoon, I stopped by Lena's office. Not inside, I parked across the street. Through the glass walls, I could see her. Perfectly composed, laughing with colleagues, pretending nothing had happened. Martin passed by her desk, brushed her shoulder lightly, and she smiled that same practiced smile. She looked happy, almost proud. I took out my phone, opened the voice note I'd saved from her phone. Martin's voice filled the car again. Don't worry, love. He'll never know. Tomorrow's about us. But now I wasn't the one in the dark. I pressed record on my own device, playing his voice over the speaker while filming the building from my car window. Then, calmly, I compiled the messages, timestamps, and photos from the party that were already circulating on social media, the ones where her hand rested too easily on Martin's arm. The digital world remembers everything. That night, I checked into a small hotel on the edge of the city, quiet, clean, anonymous. I didn't tell her where I was. I didn't answer her texts. They came in waves. Where are you? We need to talk. Please, I didn't mean for this to go this far. Johnson, I can't sleep. I didn't reply. Silence is more painful than words, and I wanted her to feel every inch of it. At around 2 a.m., I finally messaged her one line. You'll understand soon. The next morning, I sat at the cafe again watching the world wake up. The plan was taking shape piece by piece, not driven by anger but by precision. I'd been the loyal husband, the provider, the man who built a life around someone else's comfort. But she'd mistaken kindness for weakness. That was her first mistake. Her second mistake was underestimating how much I paid attention. I remembered a conversation from months back. Lena bragging about how Martin was skirting HR policies, using company funds for team outings that were really private dinners. She laughed it off at the time. But I remembered every word, every detail. Now I had what I needed. That evening, I emailed an anonymous tip to her company's HR department. A short message with attached screenshots, audio clips, and a video file titled, Inappropriate Conduct Between Senior Executive and Employee. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. The evidence would speak for itself. Then I sat back in my hotel room, turned off the lights, and watched the city glow from the window. She'd wake up tomorrow thinking she still had everything. The job, the image, the illusion. By the afternoon, she'd realize she had nothing left but the truth. And I'd be watching quietly from a distance, as the life she'd built on deception began to crumble. I wasn't going to destroy her. I was just going to reveal her, to herself, to him, and to everyone who ever believed her lies. Because sometimes the cruelest revenge isn't rage or ruin. Clarity. Subscribe as you continue enjoying. Story by midweek. The storm had started. I didn't have to look for it, it came to me. On Tuesday morning, I received an anonymous email, forwarded screenshots of the HR thread from Lena's firm. Someone inside must have leaked it. The subject line read, "Confidential, internal review." The message was short. "Effective immediately, Mr. Martin Hale is suspended pending investigation. Employee, Lena Wayne also under review." I read it twice, 3 times, then closed my laptop. My coffee had gone cold, but I smiled for the first time in days. By noon, her call started again. I ignored the first few. By the 5th one, curiosity won. "Johnson," she burst out the second I answered. Her voice was frantic. No polish, no control. "You have to help me. They think I leaked something. They've suspended me." "Suspended?" I asked, feigning surprise. "What happened?" "I don't know," she lied, the desperation bleeding through. "Someone sent in messages, voice notes, even photos from the party. They said it was misconduct. Martin's been pulled into meetings all day. It's insane, Johnson. She stopped herself. I let the silence hang long enough for her to feel its weight. "Johnson," she whispered, "please?" "You didn't?" "Didn't what?" I said softly. "Didn't do what you and Martin did?" A sob cracked through her breath. "Why are you doing this to me?" "I'm not doing anything to you, Lena," I said, my voice calm, almost kind. "I'm just letting the truth breathe." She tried to speak again, but her words collapsed into static. I hung up. That night I couldn't sleep. Not out of guilt, but because revenge doesn't end when the trap snaps shut. It lingers, echoing in the quiet. I stared at the ceiling, wondering if this feeling, this cold satisfaction, was what healing looked like. But the truth is, it wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was emptiness wearing victory's mask. I remembered the first time we met, a decade ago at a design exhibition in Shoreditch. She had this spark in her eyes, like she saw the world in colors I hadn't noticed before. I loved that about her. Now that same spark had burned everything we'd built. 2 days later I saw her again, by accident or maybe fate. I was walking near her office, coffee in hand, when she stumbled out of a black cab, looking wrecked. Her once glossy hair hung limp, her makeup smudged, her phone pressed tight to her ear. "Please, Martin," she said, her voice cracking. "We can fix this. Just tell them." Pause. Then her face drained of color. She pulled the phone away and stared at the screen. He'd hung up. I watched from across the street as she stood there, clutching her coat, lost in a sea of strangers. That's when it hit me. Martin had already moved on. Men like him always do. She was disposable. And maybe deep down she'd always known that. A week later her sister called me. "Johnson," she said quietly, "Lena's not doing well. She's been staying at Mom's. She won't eat, won't talk. I don't know what happened between you two, but she's breaking." For a moment I almost said something, an explanation, maybe even comfort. But then I remembered the night of the party. The look in her eyes when she pretended I didn't exist. "She made her choices," I said finally. "We all live with the walls we build." When I hung up, I felt that familiar hollowness again. I'd expected it to fade, but it hadn't. Revenge doesn't bring peace. It just trades one wound for another. Still, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. 2 days later, I received a text from an unknown number. "You got what you wanted. I lost everything. Are you happy now?" I stared at it for a long time. Then typed back, "No. But at least I'm free." It was late autumn when she finally came to see me. I'd moved into a new flat overlooking the Thames, smaller, quieter, and mine. The knock on the door came just after sunset. When I opened it, she stood there, pale, thinner, wrapped in a wool coat like it could shield her from shame. "Can we talk?" she asked. I hesitated, then stepped aside. We sat at the table in silence for a while. The city lights flickered through the window, painting her face in fragments. She looked fragile, like a painting left in the rain. "Johnson," she began softly, "I never wanted it to end like this." "Neither did I said. "But you made it happen." "I thought he loved me," she whispered. I thought I could start over." "You stopped seeing me, Johnson. You stopped listening. And that's why you betrayed me?" I said quietly. "Because I didn't notice you enough?" Her eyes shimmered with tears. "I'm sorry." For a moment, neither of us spoke. I watched her, wondering if she meant it, or if it was just another performance. "Do you hate me?" she asked finally. "No," I said. "I don't hate you, Lena. I pity you." She flinched like I'd struck her. After a long silence, she stood. "Goodbye, Johnson." "Goodbye," I said, meaning it this time. When the door closed behind her, it felt like the end of a long storm. Months passed. I threw myself into work, took long walks along the river, rebuilt myself brick by brick. I stopped checking her social media, stopped asking mutual friends how she was. But one evening, scrolling through the news, her name appeared again, not as a scandal this time but in an announcement. Former corporate executive Lena Morris launches charity for women recovering from workplace abuse. I read the article twice. She looked changed. Not the flawless woman from before but human. Maybe broken in a way that made her real again. And for the first time I didn't feel anger. I just felt done. It was raining again the night I drove past her old firm, the same street where everything had started. I pulled over, watching the raindrops race down the windshield. In the reflection I saw myself, older, quieter but stronger. They say revenge is about making the other person suffer. But standing there, I realized it had never really been about her. It was about me, reclaiming the part of myself I'd given away too easily. I rolled down the window, breathed in the cold London air, and let the rain wash over my hand. For the first time in months I felt light. I didn't need closure from her. I was the closure. As I drove away my phone buzzed once. A new message. It was from an unknown number again. I hope you're happy now. I didn't reply. I didn't even open it. Because some stories don't need sequels. But as the lights of the city blurred behind me, I knew one thing. If life ever tried to play me like that again, I wouldn't just walk away quietly. I'd make sure the world remembered how it felt when a loyal man finally stops forgiving. And never looks back. Subscribe, like, comment and share for interesting stories.